My name is Lauren Pierce. I'm 32 years old, and I can tell you the exact moment I realized my family never saw me as anything more than a convenient safety net. It happened on an evening in late autumn, inside a house that had once felt like a refuge, but had slowly turned into a place where my worth was measured by what I could provide. The air smelled like rosemary chicken and tension. My mother had lit the candles she saved for holidays, even though none of us felt festive. My father sat at the head of the table pretending to scroll through something important on his phone. My older brother Mason slouched in his seat like he was waiting for the moment he could escape. And my younger sister Haley, well, she was the storm I never saw coming. The meal had been uneventful until the silence shifted in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a tightening like the moment right before a string snaps. Haley leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and stared right at me with the kind of look that strips away the veil you pretend not to see. Her voice was steady. Too steady. "You know what, Lauren? You're getting in the way. All of us are exhausted. It's time you stop depending on us and start carrying yourself. We're done supporting you." For 3 seconds, I couldn't breathe. Not because of what she said, but because every pair of eyes around that table did not widen, did not shift, did not disagree. My mother lifted her wine glass and took a long sip as if the words were nothing more than mild gossip. My father stared at his plate. And Mason, always the quiet one, made the smallest noise. Something halfway between a sigh and a laugh, like he agreed but didn't want credit for it. I didn't say a word. Inside, something slid loose, a thin thread that had been holding me together for years. What none of them seemed to remember was simple. I had been the one supporting all of them. 2 years earlier, when the family hardware business started collapsing under bad loans and worse decisions, it was my salary from an environmental consulting firm that kept the lights on. When my father's health declined and he needed medication, insurance didn't fully cover, I added another bill to my name. When Haley couldn't pay her car repairs, I handled it. When Mason quit another job because he was still figuring things out, I helped him with rent so he wouldn't move back home, but none of that sat at the table that night with us. Only expectations did piled high and unspoken. I pushed my chair back. No dramatic scene, no raised voice, just a quiet, scraping sound that somehow felt louder than anything else in the room. "I hear you," I said. Those 3 words were all I offered before I stood and walked out the front door. Not one of them followed me. I drove without knowing where I was going, the road blurry through a film of disbelief. I ended up in the driveway of the only people who had ever given me a sense of unconditional belonging, Mara and Daniel Grayson. She had been my mentor at work before retiring, and he had treated me like the daughter they never had. When I knocked, Mara opened the door with worry already forming in her eyes. She didn't ask what happened. She just put a hand on my back and guided me inside their warm, softly lit living room. I slept on their couch that night, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like lavender detergent and peace. When morning light filtered through the curtains, my phone buzzed with a relentless series of vibrations. I saw the number 27 missed calls, all from the family who less than 12 hours earlier told me I was a burden. I didn't open a single voicemail. Not yet. Not until my mind could structure the chaos into something real. Over breakfast, Mara sat across from me stirring honey into her tea. She didn't pry, she simply said, "Sometimes the people who rely on you the most are the first to forget what you've given." Her words unlocked something in me, an ache mixed with clarity. I pulled out my wallet and removed the folded stack of receipts and bills I carried everywhere. Payments I'd made without complaint, costs I had absorbed while telling myself family was worth it. I spread them across the table like cards in a rigged game. Mortgage supplements, medical copays, loan interest payments, utility bills. I'd covered when my father's business had a slow month. Car insurance for Haley, rent for Mason, grocery totals too frequent to count. A quiet heaviness settled over the table. Mara reached for the papers, her fingertips brushing the evidence of 2 years of sacrifice. "Lauren, this is a lot." It was, and yet for so long I had convinced myself it wasn't enough to matter. Seeing it through someone else's eyes made the truth impossible to ignore. By the time the clock struck 9, a decision took shape inside me, not sharp or vengeful, but steady and absolute. For the first time in years, I would stop carrying a weight no one else even acknowledged. Each bill, each automatic withdrawal, each quiet responsibility I had taken on without recognition, it was all going to end, and I would let the consequences fall exactly where they belonged. I powered on my laptop. I logged into the account portals one by one. Electricity, water, insurance, loan contributions, business debt assistance. Every cancellation required a confirmation. Every confirmation felt like releasing a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. By the time the last prompt disappeared from the screen, my hands no longer shook. I felt centered and strangely quiet. Not vindictive, not triumphant. Just done. And the fallout. It arrived faster than I could have imagined. The first missed call after the cancellations wasn't angry. It was frantic. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I wasn't theirs to summon. I was free, and I had no idea just how much everything was about to unravel. The second day away from my family began in a silence so complete, it felt like standing in a cathedral. Mara and Daniel had already left for their morning walk, by the time sunlight spread across the living room floor. For a moment, I just sat there grounding myself in the quiet. No footsteps stomping overhead, no phone vibrating with new demands, no one asking when I'd cover the next bill, just stillness. I didn't realize how foreign peace felt until I was surrounded by it, but it didn't last long. My phone lit up again this time. Not with missed calls, but fresh ones ringing one after another. My mother first, then Haley, then Mason, my father. The rotation continued in a loop so frantic it almost became comical, but I didn't laugh. I watched the screen until it dimmed. Then came the texts. Walls of messages, each one more desperate than the last. Haley, are you kidding me? The internet is out. I have a deadline. Fix this. Mom, honey, what's going on? The mortgage company called. Can you please call them back? Dad, Lauren. Call me now, Mason. The electric company said the account owner ended the coverage. Did you do something? I didn't answer a single one. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. For years, my phone had been the lifeline they clung to whenever anything at all went wrong. It didn't matter if it was a late bill or an emotional meltdown or a dispute over grocery money. I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one who always had a plan, always had a solution, always had a check ready to clear. And because I had always stepped in, they never learned to stand. Now they would have to, but the messages shifted quickly from panic to anger. Haley again. Unbelievable. You're acting childish. Get over whatever this is, Dad. You need to fix this before the power company charges reconnection fees. Mom, Lauren, please, you're scaring me. Her last message was the only one that made my breath hitch. Not because of guilt, but because it was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd ever heard from her. But even then, there were no apologies, no acknowledgments, no recognition of what had been taken from me, only fear of losing the conveniences my presence provided. I closed the screen. I wasn't ready to be dragged back into their panic. Instead, I grabbed a sweater from the armchair, stepped outside onto the porch, and inhaled the crisp morning air. Mara's property sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees just beginning to turn red. It was nothing like the chaotic house I'd left behind, where tension clung to the walls and exhaustion seeped into every hour. For the first time, I felt space, actual emotional space, to observe my life without being drowned by it. And that's when the grief arrived. Not loud, not messy, just a soft ache that spread through my ribs. Because the truth wasn't that they didn't love me. Love in its fractured form existed somewhere in that house. The truth was that they had learned to love me as a function, not a person, as a solution, a resource, a fallback plan, and I had allowed it for years. I'd told myself that being dependable was the same as being valued, that being needed was the same as being wanted, that sacrifice offered long enough would eventually be recognized. But it never was. A car rolled to a slow stop in front of the house. I froze. My mother stepped out, clutching her phone in one hand and her purse in the other, her face pale with a mix of worry and determination. I didn't move. She walked toward me, her steps small and quick, like she wasn't sure if she should run or retreat. "Lauren," she said, voice trembling. "Honey, what's happening?" For a moment, her vulnerability pierced through the wall I'd built around myself. But then she said the next sentence. "We can't live like this. You need to turn everything back on. A piece of me hardened. Not, are you okay? Not, we're sorry. Not, we shouldn't have said those things last night. Not, we didn't realize how much you were carrying. Just a demand dressed up as concern. Mom, I said slowly, I'm not a utility company. She blinked. Of course not. But you've always handled these things. I don't understand why you're suddenly refusing to help. Suddenly, that word, it nearly made me laugh. There is nothing sudden about 2 years of financial responsibility crushing your spine. Nothing sudden about handing over paycheck after paycheck to keep people afloat who don't see you drowning. Because I said quietly it was never supposed to be all on me. Her lips parted. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. The silence between us grew so wide I could hear the wind moving through the trees. She exhaled long and shaky. Please come home and talk this out. Home. That house was no longer home. It was a place where love and obligation had fused into something unrecognizable. I'm not ready, I told her. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw something shift in her fear. Yes, but also anger. The kind embedded deep built from decades of expectation. She tightened her grip on her purse. What are we supposed to do until you decide you're ready? Figure it out, I said, like I have been. Her jaw clenched. And that was the moment I knew she hadn't come here to understand me. She'd come to reclaim what I provided. She left without hugging me, without saying she loved me, without asking another question. She simply turned, walked back to her car and drove away. I stayed on the porch long after the sound of her engine faded. The ache in my chest didn't lessen, but it shifted, making room for something new, resolve, because the fallout hadn't even begun yet. And once the real consequences hit, every one of them would have to face a truth they'd spent years avoiding. I had been holding their lives together, and now they would learn what happened when the glue finally stopped sticking. The first real wave of consequences didn't hit my family until 2 days after I walked out. That was when the utilities officially shut off one after another, like dominoes finally tipping. I didn't know the exact timing. It wasn't like I kept a spreadsheet of their reliance, but I could imagine it. The lights flickering, the heater clicking off the router, blinking into silence. A house that had always hummed with my support suddenly fell still. I didn't hear from them for a full morning. Silence for once felt like mercy. I spent that time helping Mara organize her garage for a community event. It felt strange grounding myself with something physical, something that required no emotional negotiation. We worked in comfortable quiet, and when she paused to hand me a bottle of water, she said something simple yet devastating. You look lighter. I hadn't realized I did, but when I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, I felt the absence of that constant coil of tension in my shoulders. The knowledge that no one was waiting for me to solve something. The stillness of knowing my phone wasn't an alarm system for someone else's crisis. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't even smile. The feeling was too new, too fragile to claim, but it was real. It was mine. Around noon, the silence broke. My phone rang with a number I knew better than my own heartbeat, my father. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what he sounded like when the ground beneath him shifted. I accepted the call. His voice came through clipped, jagged Lauren. Your mother says you shut everything off. I didn't shut anything off, I said calmly. I canceled the accounts that were in my name. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. He inhaled sharply the way he always did when he was about to get frustrated, but didn't want to show his hand. The house is freezing. We had to use flashlights last night, and your sister? I cut him off gently. Dad, the house ran on my income, my accounts, my name. It shouldn't have. He didn't speak. Silence, I found, was the truest form of confession. I let it stretch before I said I'm not coming back. Not the way things were. He exhaled so deeply I knew the weight wasn't just financial. It was emotional. We didn't realize it was this bad. That sentence unraveled me in a quiet, subtle way. Not because it was an apology, it wasn't. Not because it was understanding, he didn't. But because for the first time, he sounded like a man who understood something fundamental. The safety net he had always assumed would be there had vanished. What do you need? He asked finally. I nearly laughed. It's not about what I need. It's about what I won't do anymore. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He simply hung up. A strange mix of relief and sorrow bloomed in my chest. I didn't have long to sit with it. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. It was Haley. Her voice hit me like a gust of wildfire. Lauren, this isn't funny. My deadline is tonight. I can't work without the internet. You'll have to figure something out? You're punishing us. I'm freeing myself. That's selfish. I wasn't proud of the calmness in my voice. I've spent 2 years funding your life. That was your choice. For the first time, she wasn't entirely wrong, but the truth was more complicated than she could comprehend. My choice had been shaped by guilt, obligation, fear of being the unstable one in a family that pretended stability was everything. Haley's breathing became uneven, not with sadness, frustration, panic wrapped in entitlement. I can't believe you're doing this, she said. You're destroying everything. No, I said quietly. I'm stepping away from what was destroying me. The silence on the other end wasn't acceptance. It was disbelief, a kind of shock that happens when someone realizes their leverage no longer works. She hung up on me. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet ache. But the real twist didn't arrive until sunset. That evening, Mara opened her door to find Paula, her neighbor, a notorious spreader of information, standing there with a casserole dish and a story she couldn't hold in. She set the dish on the counter, lowered her voice, and said, "Your girl's family is causing a bit of a stir. Word is the mortgage company showed up today. A formal notice." My stomach hollowed. I shouldn't have been shocked. I knew the house was behind. I just didn't realize how far behind. Paula continued, "Your mother looked pale as paper. Your father was arguing with the man on the porch. And Haley, she stormed past me with a jacket over her pajamas. Said she was going to stay with a friend." I didn't want to know more, but I had to. "What about Mason?" I asked. Paula hesitated, then said, "He wasn't there. Someone mentioned he moved out last week." Moved out because I wasn't there. The cracks were widening faster than any of them expected. After Paula left, I stood in the doorway feeling the wind whip around me. It was cold, sharp, almost electric. The kind of cold that wakes you up from something long and heavy. Mara came up beside me. "You're not responsible for their choices," she said softly. "Only for your own." I know, I whispered, but knowing didn't stop the complicated mix of sadness and relief swirling inside me. That night, as I curled up beneath a warm blanket in the guest room, one truth anchored itself in my mind with undeniable clarity. This wasn't the collapse of my family. It was the collapse of the illusion I had been holding together. Tomorrow, the real fallout would begin, and I wasn't going back. By the third day, the unraveling was no longer subtle. It wasn't whispers or frantic phone calls. It became something visible, tangible, something I could hold in my hands if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. I didn't want any physical evidence of the collapse I'd spent years preventing. Yet the universe doesn't care what we want. It delivers truth anyway. It began with a soft knock on the door just after sunrise. Mara was in the kitchen humming as she prepared oatmeal, and Daniel was reading the newspaper with the quiet contentment only retired men seem able to master. I was pouring myself coffee when the knock came again. Gentle but insistent. I froze. Mara glanced at me. "Are you expecting someone?" I shook my head. She opened the door. No one was there. Only a single envelope resting on the welcome mat, weighted by a small stone to keep it from blowing away. The paper was thick, off-white official. My name was written across the front in my mother's delicate handwriting. My stomach sank before I even picked it up. Mara watched me carefully as I slid my thumb beneath the seal. I didn't want to open it, but I knew avoidance wouldn't change anything. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a copy of a mortgage notice, one step before foreclosure. The numbers didn't matter. The implications did. They were behind, far behind. The bank wasn't issuing warnings anymore. It was preparing consequences. Attached was a note in my mother's handwriting. "Lauren, we need your help. Please come home so we can fix this together, Mom." I stared at the page until my vision blurred. There it was, the familiar script of their expectations. Not an apology, not accountability, a request disguised as unity, a plea that translated to, "Come save us again." Mara stepped forward slowly. "Lauren, you don't owe them your financial future." "I know," I whispered, but the truth was heavy, pressing against the back of my throat. "I also don't want them to lose the house." Mara placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're not the one who put it at risk." I knew she was right. But knowing and feeling aren't the same. I took the envelope to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed again. Another number, another voicemail I wouldn't listen to. I switched it to silent and set it aside. My father's voice echoed in my mind. My mother's pleading tone. Haley's anger, Mason's absence. Everyone wanted something from me. No one wanted to see me. I lay back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. For a long time, I didn't move. I let myself feel everything: anger, guilt, relief, grief. They tangled together until I couldn't tell where one ended and another began. Eventually, I sat up, pulled the laptop onto my knees, and opened an email draft. I typed 2 sentences. I'm safe. I'm not coming home. Please stop asking me to fix things I didn't break. I didn't send it. I deleted it. They wouldn't hear it anyway. By afternoon, the sky thickened with dark clouds and the wind grew sharp, scattering leaves down the street. I stayed inside helping Daniel repair an old planter box. Manual work steadied me in a way emotional decisions couldn't. Then, as if the day hadn't already demanded enough clarity, someone knocked again. Not gentle this time. A firm, urgent knock. I opened the door. Haley stood there, wrapped in a too-thin jacket, hair frizzed by wind and panic eyes red from crying or not sleeping or both. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me into the living room. "Lauren," she said, breath shaking, "you have to come home right now." Mara stepped in protectively. "Haley, this isn't the place." Haley ignored her. She turned to me with something close to fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Mom's been on the phone all day. Dad's calling lawyers. The bank." "I know," I said quietly. "I saw the notice." "Then why aren't you home fixing it?" The audacity of it, the entitlement wrapped in fear made my jaw tighten. "Because I said it's not mine to fix." She laughed a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You're unbelievable. You act like you're the victim, but you walked away from us. You left your family." "Haley, you told me I was a burden." She froze, her mouth opened slightly. For once, she had no script ready. I didn't mean." "You did," I said, maybe not consciously, but you did." Her eyes glossed with fresh tears. Her voice cracked. "I was angry. I was stressed. I shouldn't have said it." It wasn't one sentence, Haley. It was the truth underneath all the sentences. She shook her head. No, you're twisting it. We need you. We've always needed you. And that's the problem." Her breath rattled. "You can't just abandon us." "I didn't abandon you. I walked away from a system that used me." Her hands curled into fists. Not threatening, just trembling. "If we lose the house, it'll be your fault." That landed like a blow. Not because it was true, because she believed it. Deeply, completely. I swallowed hard. "If you lose the house, it will be because none of you took responsibility when you should have." Haley's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know how to do this without you." That sentence, honest, vulnerable, pierced more deeply than any accusation, but it still wasn't enough. "Haley," I said gently, "you're going to have to learn." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I didn't either. She stepped back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her jacket. "Fine. Stay here. Pretend you're better than us." "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she snapped. "It's me choosing myself for once." Silence. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just turned, walked to the door, and before stepping out said something so soft I barely heard it. "You're going to regret this." When the door closed, the room felt colder. Mara crossed the space and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't cry. I felt wrung out already. "She doesn't understand," Mara murmured. "She can't," I whispered back. "Not yet. But she would, sooner than any of us expected, because the house was just the beginning, and the collapse had only started to show its teeth. By the 4th day, the storm outside finally matched the chaos inside my family's world. Rain hammered the windows of Mara and Daniel's house. Wind rattled the porch railing, and thunder rolled overhead like the sky was warning me something was coming. And it did. Not with a knock this time, but with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. I'd learned quickly that unknown almost always meant family using someone else's phone. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe curiosity, made me swipe to answer. "Hello." A pause. Then a man's voice, low and professional. "Is this Lauren Pierce?" "Yes." "This is Officer Darrell Hughes with the Brookhaven Police Department. We're calling because—" My heart stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. He continued. "Someone reported a disturbance at your parents' address. We need to confirm a few details." My breath caught. What kind of disturbance? An altercation between family members. One individual became physically aggressive. We're still sorting through statements. My stomach turned cold. "Is everyone okay?" "There were no serious injuries, but a report has been filed." A beat of silence, one that felt like an entire chapter of my life closing. "Ms. Pierce," he added, Your name came up in the statements. We'd like to speak with you when you have a moment. When you say my name came up, what do you mean? Your sister indicated the situation began because of a financial dispute involving you. Of course she did. Of course. Officers won't need you to come in today, he said. But we may have follow-up questions. My hands trembled. Relief and dread tangled together in a way I couldn't unravel. Thank you, I said quietly. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, staring at nothing. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. I didn't even realize Daniel had stepped inside until he sat down next to me. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. Maybe I did. He waited patiently, gently, the way good people do, and I told him everything the officer said. When I finished, Daniel rubbed his chin. Families under pressure do strange things. But you didn't cause that fight, Lauren. You stepping away didn't create the dysfunction. It exposed it. I nodded, but the truth still lodged like a stone under my ribs. Because the fight didn't surprise me. The collapse didn't surprise me. But hearing law enforcement say my name in connection with my family's unraveling, that hit different. Before I could unpack the feeling, the storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed. Thunder cracked. The power flickered, but Mara's house, unlike my parents', stayed warm, steady, alive. At lunchtime, Mara put a bowl of stew in front of me. I didn't touch it. Eat, she said softly. You need strength. What if they blame me for everything, I whispered. They already do, she said plainly. That's nothing new. What's new is you not letting it crush you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel the strength she saw in me. But the truth was, strength often feels like grief in disguise. That afternoon, another message arrived, but not from my family. It came from my former coworker, Jana, a woman who always seemed to know everything happening in town before anyone else did. Her text read, "Heard your parents' place was crawling with cops this morning. You okay? Rumors travel fast in small towns. Faster than truth. Faster than logic." I replied with the safest words I could muster. I'm fine, just taking space. She wrote back, "Good, you deserve peace. They took advantage of you for too long." I stared at her words, stunned by how accurately she summed up the thing I had never been able to say aloud. But the day wasn't finished unraveling. Around 4 in the afternoon, Haley called again. I didn't want to answer. I knew her voice would drag me back into a place I'd spent days clawing my way out of, but worry over the police report tugged at me. When I picked up, her voice was thin, shaky. Nothing like the sharp-edged version I knew. They came to the house, she whispered. The police. I know I said they called me. She let out a choked sound. Half a sob, half a broken thought. It wasn't my fault. That sentence wasn't an apology. It never was. Haley, I said gently. What happened? Silence. Then, Dad snapped. I closed my eyes. She continued. He and Mom were arguing about the mortgage. About you. About everything. He said, you abandoned us. Mom said he pushed you too hard, and then he threw a chair. A chair. My father had never been violent. Never even raised his voice above a frustrated mutter. What did you do? I asked carefully. Haley took a slow, shaking breath. I yelled at him. I told him this was his fault, that he couldn't depend on you forever. And he threw another chair. Not at me, just in the room. I pressed my palm against my forehead. Mom called the police, she whispered. They made him leave for a few hours. I didn't speak. There wasn't anything left to say. How did it get this bad? She asked, her voice splintering. Because none of them knew how to stand without leaning on me. Because the illusion of stability I created had been the only thing holding the family together. Because I wasn't their problem. I was their glue. Haley, I said quietly. I'm sorry you're going through this. Come home, she begged, please. Her voice cracked raw with fear. This isn't about punishment, we need you. Those 3 words, we need you, were a velvet chain. Soft, coercive, familiar. But I wasn't stepping back into shackles. No, I whispered, I'm not coming home. A gasping breath, you don't mean that. I do. Her next words were not anger. They were desperation. The house won't survive this without you. I swallowed. Then it won't survive. She broke. Actually broke. Her sobs filled the phone until I felt them in my bones. But I didn't fold. I couldn't. When the call finally ended, I sat motionless, the phone still warm in my hand. Mara appeared in the doorway. Behind her, lightning split the sky. You can't save a sinking ship by drowning with it, she said quietly. I know, but that didn't stop me from feeling the weight of every board, every nail, every inch of the collapsing house, pressing against me like a memory I couldn't shake. The storm raged on, and for the first time I realized The collapse wasn't the punishment, it was the truth finally reaching daylight. By the fifth day, the collapse of my family was no longer contained behind closed doors or whispered through phone calls. It spilled into the town, seeping under doorways, drifting across porches, weaving itself into the casual gossip exchanged at coffee shops and gas stations. Small town news travels faster than wildfire, and nothing burns hotter than the spectacle of a respectable family falling apart. I didn't hear the stories firsthand. They came to me through people who cared enough to check in or who couldn't resist sharing the newest development. Like Jana again. My old coworker with an uncanny talent for collecting information. She texted me mid-morning. "Saw your mom at the market. She looked rough. Heard they're behind on everything. People are saying there was a scene at the hardware store between your dad and the lender's agent." I stared at my phone, the words blurring slightly. My father had built that hardware store. It was his pride, his identity. The place where he shook hands with neighbors and handed out coffee to regulars. To imagine him having a scene with anyone there made my chest tighten. Jana sent another message before I could respond. "Someone said he blamed you." Of course he did. It was easier to cast me as the villain than to face the hard truth that he'd let the business crumble long before I ever stepped away. I typed a small reply. "Thanks for letting me know." But my stomach churned. An hour later, while I was helping Daniel stack firewood along the side of the house, another car slowed at the curb. Paula, ever the observer, rolled down her passenger side window. "Lauren, sweetheart," she called, "you might want to know. People are talking." She meant it kindly, but the phrase still carried the sting of shame. I walked closer. "Talking about what?" She sighed, leaning toward me as if ready to deliver bad news, gently, a skill she'd perfected. "Your sister told someone at the cafe that she can't work because you cut off the internet. She said you're having some kind of breakdown." My jaw tightened. "I'm not having a breakdown." "I know that," Paula said quickly. "Anyone with sense knows that, but there's a lot of confusion, and confusion makes room for stories." Stories. That word lingered in the air, because my family had always been good at stories. The kind that paint themselves as the reasonable ones, the responsible ones, the victims of circumstance, rather than the architects of their own disaster. Paula hesitated, then lowered her voice further. "Your father told someone outside the store that his ungrateful daughter abandoned them. He said you were punishing them for a simple disagreement." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "A simple disagreement. If only." Paula laid a hand over mine. "People don't know the truth." "Not yet." I nodded, but inside me something tightened, a knot, woven of anger, grief, and a new feeling I hadn't identified before: anticipation. Because their narrative was beginning to crumble, because the cracks were widening, because people were starting to question their version of events. By late afternoon, the weather had cleared, but the tension inside me had not. I could feel it building like pressure in the atmosphere. Mara sensed it too. After dinner, she sat across from me at the table and said, "It won't be long before they come up here again. People don't let go of their expectations easily." She wasn't wrong, and right on cue the knock came. A sharp, hurried, unmistakable knock. I opened the door. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Haley. It was Mason. My brother, who had been silent through all of this, stood on the porch with a backpack slung over one shoulder and exhaustion stamped across his face. His eyes were sunken, his jaw unshaven, and he looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked into the living room like someone entering a sanctuary. The weight he carried almost visible. Mara brought water, then politely excused herself, giving us space. Mason sat on the edge of the armchair, elbows on his knees. "I moved out," he said quietly. "I heard. I left 3 days ago." He didn't look at me. Not at first. He stared at his hands. Hands rough from a construction job he rarely kept. Hands that trembled slightly now. "They're falling apart, Lore," he whispered. "For real. It's not just bills anymore." He rubbed his face. "Dad's angry all the time. Mom's trying to hold everything together, but she cries when she thinks no one can hear. And Haley, she's blaming everyone but herself." I didn't speak. Mason took a slow breath. "I know what they said to you. I know they made you feel like everything was your responsibility. I didn't stop them. That's on me." My throat tightened. This was the first time any of them had acknowledged my reality. "I should have defended you," he said, voice cracking. "I should have said something, but I didn't want to be the next problem. I didn't want them to lean on me the way they leaned on you. There it was, the selfishness he'd never admitted, but also the truth. And truth spoken honestly carries a strange kind of grace. Mason, I said I didn't leave to hurt anyone. I know his voice was quiet. I left because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. He nodded slowly. I get it now. Silence wrapped around us, not heavy, just honest. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. They're going to lose the house. I swallowed. I know. They're hoping you'll fix it, he added, but please don't. I looked at him sharply. He held my gaze steady and unflinching. They need to learn what life looks like without you holding up every beam. The truth hit me like a wave. Unexpected, inevitable, clarifying. Mason continued. I'm not here to ask for anything. I needed to tell you. I'm sorry for being silent, for letting you drown while I pretended everything was fine. His voice cracked again. You deserved better. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Mason stood and pulled me into a hug. Awkward, hesitant, but real. Whatever happens next, he whispered, you owe them nothing. When he left, Mara returned, her expression soft. Not all endings are cruel, she said quietly. Some are beginnings, wrapped in grief. I nodded, because that day for the first time the balance shifted. Not back in favor of my family, but back to me. The town was talking. My parents were unraveling. My sister was frantic. My brother had woken up. And me? For the first time I wasn't drowning. But the real storm, the one that would turn everything upside down, hadn't arrived yet. It was waiting. And when it hit, none of us would be the same. By the sixth day, the unraveling wasn't just inside my family or drifting through town gossip. It became public, visible, undeniable, impossible to spin into anything respectable or quiet. Small towns love one thing more than tradition, a scandal with familiar faces attached. And my family had become the main attraction. But I didn't learn that immediately. The morning began peacefully. Daniel brewed coffee the way he always did, strong enough to wake the dead, comforting enough to revive the living. Mara set out toast with homemade blackberry jam. Sunlight filled the kitchen like a blessing. For a few minutes, I let myself breathe in a world that wasn't on fire. Then I made the mistake of checking my phone. A message from Jana. You should avoid downtown today. There's drama in front of the hardware store. People are recording. Your family is a mess. My hands went cold before the rest of me caught up. I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. 2 minutes later, she sent a follow-up text. Someone yelled your name in public. Not kindly. I closed my eyes. Mara saw my expression and stopped mid-step. Lauren. What is it? I showed her the phone. Her face tightened, not with surprise, but with a kind of protective anger that only people who love you unconditionally can feel. Sit, she said softly. I did. She placed both hands on the table, steady and sure. Listen to me. Whatever's happening out there, it's not your fault. I nodded, but my chest was already tightening, because even if it wasn't my fault, it was still my legacy to face. Around noon, I received another message, this time from Paula, because of course it was Paula. Her text read, your parents are arguing with the mortgage rep in the parking lot. People are filming. I'm so sorry, honey. I nearly dropped the phone. I should go there, I said before I could stop myself. Daniel set down his newspaper. No, you shouldn't. But you'll only become the centerpiece of their spectacle, he said firmly. Let them face their own consequences. Mara nodded. There's nothing you can do that won't make things worse for you. They were right. But that didn't stop the ache. That didn't stop the guilt. That didn't stop the feeling that my family's collapse was a parade with my name written on every float. I stayed put. That afternoon, a long voicemail came through from my mother. I didn't want to listen, but my hands moved on their own. Her voice was trembling, not with anger now, but something closer to humiliation. Lauren, people are talking. They're saying horrible things. Your father is furious. The mortgage company sent a man who embarrassed us in front of everyone. We tried to explain you've been going through a difficult time, but I paused the audio. Going through a difficult time. That was their narrative. That I was unstable, overreacting, too emotional, fragile. Not that I finally reached my limit. Not that I spent years patching holes no one else bothered to fill. Not that their exploitation had become a family tradition. No, I was the one going through something. I pressed play again. And Haley is telling people you shut everything off out of spite. Lauren, this isn't helping anybody. Please come home. Fix this before it gets worse. Fix this. Always fix this. Always me. I stopped the voicemail. Mara sat across from me, her eyes filled with the kind of compassion that makes you feel seen and undone at the same time. They're losing control, she said softly. And when people lose control, they scramble for someone to blame. They're blaming me. Because you're the easiest one to paint as responsible. You always were. I looked down at my hands, hands that once steadied an entire household. Now they trembled, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. A different message arrived. This time from Mason. He never texted long messages, but this one was paragraphs. Lauren, I don't know if Mom or Haley called you. Stay away from the store. Dad's losing it. He yelled at the mortgage rep, cussed him out, said you abandoned the family. People heard everything. Mom tried to defend you but made it worse. Please don't come here. You'll walk into a disaster. My throat tightened. The next line was the worst. They want you here to take the fall. I set the phone down like it suddenly weighed as much as concrete. Daniel reached over and covered my hand with his, grounding me. You're not their scapegoat anymore. And for the first time in my entire life, I believed him. But the day wasn't done. Around 3 in the afternoon, someone knocked on the door again. Hesitant, unsure, like they were afraid of being seen. I opened it. My mother stood there. Her makeup was smudged, her coat damp from sweat or tears or both. Her shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before, as if life itself had finally grown too heavy to carry upright. Lauren, she whispered, please can we talk? I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered with the tentative shuffle of someone entering foreign territory. Mara discreetly stepped away, giving us space. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, twisting her wedding ring around her finger again and again. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, your father is furious. He's blaming everyone, especially you. I stayed silent. She continued, Haley is overwhelmed. She says you're punishing her. People in town are repeating things. Some of them aren't true. I leaned forward slightly. What part isn't true, Mom? She blinked. Confusion crossed her face for a brief moment, as if she hadn't expected to be questioned. Then softly, you didn't have to leave. A spark of something sharp flared in me. I had to, I said, you all made that clear. That was a misunderstanding. No, I said, it was clarity. Her lips parted, trembling. We need you, Lauren. There it was again. Need. Not love, not care, not respect. Need. Mom, I said quietly, you need stability, not me. She shook her head fiercely. You're wrong. You're part of this family. Families don't walk away when things get hard. I met her gaze. Families don't call someone a burden, I said softly. And families don't forget who held them together. She inhaled sharply as if the words slapped her. I know we weren't fair, she whispered. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest she'd ever come. I waited. She clasped her hands. Come home, please, before things get worse. I swallowed. What if I don't? Her expression cracked. Not anger, but fear. The raw, terrified kind that comes from losing the one person you assumed would never leave. Then she whispered, we might lose everything. I sat back, because she didn't mean the house. Not really. She meant her scapegoat, her bandage, her buffer, her daughter who never said no. I inhaled slowly, exhaled, and said the words she feared most. Then you'll have to. Silence engulfed the room. My mother stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't, because for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't bending, I wasn't cushioning, I wasn't rescuing. I was letting the truth stand on its own legs, even if my family never learned how. My mother left Mara's house without another word, without a hug, without even looking back. The door clicked shut with a softness that hurt more than a slam would have. Some endings whisper before they break. The quiet afterward was sharp. Mara approached slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal. Do you want tea? A walk. Silence. Silence, I whispered. She nodded and stepped back. I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the imprint where my mother had been sitting. The dent in the cushion felt like a metaphor. My family had always left marks, but never warmth. Eventually, I forced my body to move. I walked to the kitchen sink, splashed cold water on my face, and studied my reflection in the window. I looked tired, but beyond the exhaustion, there was something else. A hardness, not cruelty, just clarity. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to answer, but something told me I had to look. It was a message from Mason. Things just got worse. Dad just got served another notice. They want to repossess inventory from the store. Mom is hysterical. Haley is threatening to move out permanently. Dad says you destroyed this family. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Destroyed this family. The irony nearly knocked me off balance. They had been destroying themselves for years. I had been the glue, the scaffolding, the invisible beam holding up a structure that should have collapsed long before I ever left. But now without me, it was all falling exactly as it was always meant to. Daniel entered the kitchen. You okay? No, I said honestly, but I'm learning to be. He nodded approval in his eyes. Good. That's what healing sounds like. Healing. I hadn't realized that's what this was. It didn't feel warm or hopeful or soft. It felt brutal, necessary, surgical. A few hours passed with no more messages. I tried to work on some consulting documents for a client Daniel had introduced me to, but my mind refused to cooperate. Everything felt blurry, muffled like my thoughts were underwater. Then in the early evening, the phone rang again. Not a call. A video. From an unknown number. I hesitated, pulse picking up. Then cautiously, I tapped it open. The footage was shaky, filmed on a cell phone. It showed the hardware store. My father's pride, its parking lot cluttered with people. A bank representative stood near a company truck speaking sternly to my father. My mother hovered behind him, clutching his arm. Haley stood off to the side, pacing, wiping her face like she'd been crying. And then, my father pointed his finger directly at the camera and shouted something. The audio crackled, but the words were painfully clear. This is Lauren's fault. She abandoned us. She ruined everything. The person filming gasped softly. Someone else said, "Aren't those bills in his name?" Another voice chimed in. I heard she was the one paying for everything. The camera shifted to Haley, who turned and glared at the crowd, shouting, "None of you understand. She left us with nothing." A low voice responded, "Maybe you should have learned to stand on your own." Haley stormed off screen. The video ended abruptly. I stood frozen. My breath caught somewhere between horror and vindication, because there it was. The whole story, not told by me, not explained in whispers, not defended in private, but exposed publicly, unavoidably. The truth had finally stepped into the sunlight, and it didn't care who squinted. Mara appeared in the doorway, watching me carefully. What did you see? I handed her the phone. Her lips tightened as she watched. When it ended, she exhaled slowly. Well, she said that was coming. You think so? Yes, she said. You took away the beam holding up the facade, and when a facade falls, it makes noise. I sat down at the table, burying my face in my hands. I don't know if I can handle more of this. You can, Mara said gently, because you finally stopped handling everything for them. I lifted my head. People are going to think I'm awful. Some will, she said. Some already do. Some always have. But others they'll understand. And most important, you'll understand yourself. I swallowed hard. That whisper of self-understanding felt fragile like a small flame in a room full of drafts. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Mason. You need to prepare yourself. Dad is talking about suing you. My heart dropped. Suing me for what? For stepping away, for refusing to be exploited. I responded quickly. Is he serious? Mason replied. He's angry and desperate. Not rational, but he's looking for someone to blame who isn't himself. My hands shook. I typed, would he actually try? Mason. Mom might stop him, but Haley is encouraging it. She says you abandoned the family financially and emotionally. Abandoned. The word stung even though it shouldn't. I hadn't abandoned them. I had abandoned the burden. I had abandoned the unspoken expectation that I should sacrifice everything indefinitely. But none of them saw it that way, except Mason. He sent one last text. Just be careful. They're unraveling. Be careful. When your own family becomes something you have to be careful of, the world shifts beneath your feet. After dinner, Mara insisted I join her on the porch. The air was cool. The sky painted with streaks of lavender and coral. Crickets hummed a rhythm that felt older than the town itself. Lauren, she said quietly, you're on the edge of something important. What do you mean? You're not their savior anymore, but you're also not the villain they're painting you to be. You're transforming. And transformation is messy before it's beautiful. I leaned against the porch rail, feeling the truth settle into my bones. Messy before beautiful. Yes, this was the messy, the painful, the public, the humiliating, the necessary. And beauty, that was still far away. But for the first time, I could sense it waiting, a faint outline on the horizon. On the seventh day, the collapse reached a stage my family had never imagined possible. They still believed deep down that I would break first, that I would cave the moment things became uncomfortable for them. that guilt or fear or loyalty would drag me back into the role I'd played my entire life. They underestimated me, or rather, they misunderstood me. What they didn't know was this: once a heart snaps under enough weight, it doesn't return to its old shape. It grows different: contours, sharper edges, stronger boundaries. And mine had finally reshaped itself into something unrecognizable to the people who once leaned on it. The morning began with another message from Mason, a long one. "Lauren, it's happening. The bank confirmed foreclosure proceedings. They're giving us a final date. Mom is devastated. Dad is furious. Haley is screaming at everyone. They keep saying you could have prevented this." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, because I did so deeply, it bruised. But if I stepped in now, even for a second, I would undo everything I'd worked so painfully to build: my separation, my strength, my new sense of self. They would learn nothing, and I would lose myself again. I set the phone aside and joined Daniel outside to help repair a loose gutter. The rhythmic clink of tools steadied me. Manual work had become my quiet therapy. But then my phone buzzed again. A different tone, an email, from a law office. I froze. Daniel noticed instantly. Bad. I don't know yet. I opened it. The email was formal, cold, and direct. Subject: notice of intent to pursue legal action. Client: Pierce Hardware and Home Supply matter. Financial abandonment and liability dispute. My breath caught. The letter claimed my family intended to explore legal avenues to hold me financially responsible for the deterioration of the business and household. It didn't accuse me outright. It suggested potential liability, which is lawyer speak for: "We want to scare you before deciding if we can actually win." What broke me wasn't the threat, it was the line that followed. "Our clients assert that Ms. Lauren Pierce contributed to their financial instability by withdrawing previously provided support." Previously provided support. Support I paid for. Support I bled for. Support I sacrificed my career and my peace for, now framed as an obligation. A contract, a duty, a chain. Something inside me hardened in a way I had never felt before. Daniel read the email over my shoulder. His jaw clenched. "They don't have a legal case," he said. "They have desperation, but they're willing to try." "Yes," he said, "because they think you're still the girl who will cave the moment they threaten her." I sat down on the porch steps, heart pounding in my chest. Mara joined me, placing a warm hand between my shoulder blades. "You need a lawyer," she said, "a real one." "I can't afford—" "Yes, you can," Daniel interrupted gently. "And even if you couldn't, I'd help you." I swallowed hard. "I don't want this to become a war." "It already is," he said softly. "They just declared it." The rest of the afternoon blurred. I made calls, gathered documents, found an attorney recommended by one of Daniel's friends. Her name was Elise Bradford, and she had the kind of voice that made you feel she'd seen every ugly family dispute and never once flinched. When she answered my call, I explained everything from the bills I'd covered to the outburst at dinner, to the mortgage notice, to the public meltdown, to the threatening email. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that cracked the air around me. "You've been financially exploited, Ms. Pierce. What your family is attempting is intimidation based on guilt, not law. You have nothing to fear legally. Emotionally, though, that's different." "Yes," I whispered. "Forward me everything," she said, "and do not respond to them. Let me handle it." Her confidence stabilized me in a way I didn't expect. After the call, Mara hugged me. Daniel squeezed my shoulder. Their presence felt like scaffolding around a building under reconstruction. But the day had more to deliver. At sunset, as the sky blazed orange and violet, a car pulled into the driveway. My pulse spiked. It wasn't my mother's car. Not my father's, not Haley's. It was Mason's beat-up sedan. He stepped out, looking worse than before. Eyes red, jeans rumpled, exhaustion radiating from every movement. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. We went to the porch. He didn't sit. He paced, rubbing the back of his neck, words tangled inside him. Then he stopped, faced me, and said, "They told the lawyer you abandoned your financial duty." "My financial duty," I repeated, stunned. "Yes." His voice cracked. "They said you had committed to helping the family long term, that you broke that commitment." I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "There was never a commitment." "I know," Mason whispered, "but they're trying to rewrite the past." "Why didn't they ask you to help?" I asked. He looked at the ground. "Because I never said yes, you did." It wasn't an accusation. It was a confession. "They think yes is forever," I murmured. He nodded. After a long silence, he spoke again so quietly I almost missed it. "They're losing the house." "It's happening." No amount of pretending can stop it now. I inhaled shakily. He took a step closer. I'm not asking you to save them. I'm asking you to protect yourself. I'm trying, I whispered. You're doing it, he said. It just hurts. It did. God, it did. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this in Mom's desk. He said you should see it. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a budget breakdown handwritten in my mother's looping script. Projected household support. Lauren monthly. Total dependence. High priority. Expected contributions, utilities, mortgage, medical groceries, vehicle fees. I stared at the words. Expected priority dependence, a list of things I never agreed to. A life script they had written for me without my consent. It was never about helping, Mason whispered. It was about owning. The paper fluttered in the wind. Something inside me broke again, but this time not in pain, in liberation, because I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't stepping away from a family. I was stepping out of a role I never chose. A role they wrote for me. A role they depended on. A role they resented me for, even as they clung to it. And now the role was vacant, and they were furious, and afraid, and flailing. But I wasn't. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. Whatever happened next, whatever storm would come, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back. By the 8th day, something inside me shifted so deeply, it felt like a new spine had grown beneath my skin, stronger, steadier, unwilling to bend the way it once had. I didn't recognize myself, not entirely, but for the first time, that felt like a blessing rather than a threat. In the morning, Elise, the attorney, called with updates. Her voice was calm, measured, the kind you'd want in your corner during a hurricane. I reviewed everything she said. Their claim has no legal basis. Financial support between adult family members is not enforceable unless explicit contracts exist. There are none. I released a shaky breath. They may still attempt to push, she continued emotionally, publicly, not legally. People who rely on guilt rarely surrender quietly. It was exactly what I feared, and exactly what I needed to hear. Then she said something that made my pulse quicken. We'll be sending a cease and desist addressing the threats, the harassment, and any attempt to defame you publicly. My heart slammed against my ribs. Defame. You sent me the video, she replied gently. Your father shouting in public that you ruined everything. That is defamation if he claims it as fact. And your sister accusing you of intentionally sabotaging her employment, also actionable. I sank into the chair. Elise added, let me be clear, you are not powerless, Miss Pierce. But they're used to you believing you are. The words gathered around me like armor. After the call, I sat on the porch, letting the crisp air cool my skin. Mara came out with 2 mugs of tea, handing me one before settling beside me. So she asked gently, what did your lawyer say? That they can't win, I said, not legally. Mara smiled softly. Good. Maybe the truth will finally find its way through that house. I almost wished it would, but the truth rarely walks through the front door of a family built on denial. Sometimes it bursts through the windows, shattering everything in its path. And that whether I wanted it or not was coming. Around noon, Mason arrived again. He looked even more exhausted than before, but his presence had become a strange comfort. He sat beside me on the porch steps, elbows resting on his knees. They got the cease and desist, he said. My breath caught already. Delivered this morning. I imagined my mother opening it, hands trembling, the color draining from her face. I imagined my father reading it, jaw-tightening indignation, building like a storm. I imagined Haley rolling her eyes, saying it was all my fault. How did they react? I asked. Mason let out a humorless laugh. How do you think? I didn't answer, because I already knew. My family was a predictable machine when it came to blame. And breaking that machine meant they'd spin wildly before ever learning to move differently. Dad says he's going to fight it, Mason said. That no lawyer can scare him. Typical. Mom, he said, cried silently at the table. Not guilt, fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of consequences. Fear of being seen publicly as the mother whose daughter finally walked away. And Haley, she's furious, Mason said. She said you're weaponizing lawyers to punish us. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Lauren, Mason said, voice softening. Don't let their panic become your guilt. I'm trying. Don't try, he said, do. He left shortly after. When his car pulled away, I felt a strange combination of heartbreak and resolution. Then my phone pinged with a new message, from an unknown number again. It was a video, another one. My hands stilled. I pressed play. This time it showed the front yard of my parents' house. A crowd of neighbors stood on the sidewalk. My father was shouting, red-faced veins visible along his neck. My mother stood behind him crying into a tissue. Haley paced in front of the yard, yelling at someone off screen. The audio was faint but clear enough. "She's not family anymore," my father shouted. "She chose strangers over us." Then Haley turned to the camera, fury twisting her features. "She abandoned us!" she screamed. "She wants us homeless!" People murmured nervously. Then a voice, shaky but firm, spoke from the crowd. "She supported you for years. We all know it." Haley froze. My father snapped his attention toward the speaker. "An older man named Mr. Healy, who'd lived across from us since I was a child. She kept you afloat," he continued. "Everyone knows it." I felt my breath catch, my pulse spike. He wasn't defending me out of affection. He was defending me out of truth. And truth finally had an audience. "None of this is her fault," he added. "You relied on her too much, that's on you." My father sputtered, unable to form words. My mother covered her face. Haley screamed something unintelligible. The video cut off. My hands shook as I set my phone down. Mara approached, touching my shoulder. "People are starting to see." "I didn't want a war," I whispered. "You didn't start one," she said. "You simply stopped surrendering." The rest of the day unraveled quietly. Then at dusk, Elise called again. "I spoke with their attorney," she said. "Off the record, he knows they have no case. But he also said something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" "He said your family is considering going to the local press." I felt my entire body go still. "The press," I repeated. "Yes, they want to tell their side." I exhaled shakily. "Their side is a lie." "I know," she said, "more important they know. That's why they're trying to get ahead of the truth." "What do?" I whispered. "You do nothing," she said. "You let me handle the legal side. And you let their story collapse under its own weight." After hanging up, I went outside to sit on the porch alone. The sun was sinking, casting golden light across the quiet street. It should have been peaceful, and yet I felt the ground shifting beneath my life, rearranging itself into something new and unfamiliar. A family storming, a father unraveling, a mother crumbling, a sister lashing out, a brother awakening, a town witnessing, a lawyer preparing. And me, I wasn't the villain in their story, I wasn't the savior either. I was something entirely different, a woman reclaiming her life. And once a woman reclaims herself, there is no going back to the version others preferred. The one who bent, absorbed, complied, carried. The next chapter of this battle would not be quiet. They were going to fight harder, but so was I. By the 9th day, the air in town felt charged, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the moment the story of my family would shift from rumor to reality. Even people who barely knew us seemed to look at me longer than they used to, their eyes soft with pity or sharp with curiosity. I ignored them, mostly. What I couldn't ignore was the message Elise sent me at 7 in the morning. "The foreclosure has been finalized. The house will be listed within the week." "I'm sorry, Lauren." I sat with the message for a long time. Not crying, not panicking, just feeling. The house I grew up in, a place filled with memories, good and terrible, was no longer ours. No longer theirs. It was over. And as heavy as that realization was, it carried something else alongside the grief. Relief. Because I wasn't the one losing it. I wasn't the one scrambling to repair it. I wasn't the one expected to fix what everyone else had broken. My only responsibility was to feel the emotions come and go. Around mid-morning, the inevitable happened. My father arrived. Not at the porch, at the edge of the driveway. He stood there like a man who had lost everything except his pride. And pride, when it's cornered, becomes something sharp and unpredictable. He didn't knock. He didn't step closer. He simply stood with his hands clenched at his sides until I noticed him through the window. Mara appeared behind me. "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" I swallowed hard. "No, I should face him." She touched my arm gently. "You don't owe him anything." "I know, but I owe myself closure." I stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. My father looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence, as if the collapse of everything he built had stolen the width of his shadow. He didn't greet me. He didn't apologize. He started with accusation. "You let this happen." I met his eyes without flinching. "No, you let this happen." His jaw tightened. "I provided for this family for decades." "I never said you didn't." "You stopped supporting us." "I stopped being your solution." "That's the same thing." I shook my head. "No, it isn't." He took a step toward me. His voice dropped into that dangerous whisper I remembered from childhood, the one he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while being anything but. "We could have saved the house if you'd helped." "You mean, if I had paid?" My voice remained calm. Steady. Dad, I paid for everything, for years. I paid because you couldn't. I paid because Mom couldn't. I paid because Haley wouldn't. And you never not once asked how it affected me. You're exaggerating. I have the receipts. He blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. Lauren, he said, softening his tone, you're being influenced by these people. He gestured vaguely at Mara's home. They're putting ideas in your head. No, I said. They're helping me hear the thoughts that always lived in my head, the ones I silenced because I thought love meant sacrifice. That's not what family is. No, I agreed. Family is accountability, and we've never had that. He stiffened. You think you're better than us now? I think I said gently that I deserve the same respect and freedom you give yourselves. A long silence stretched between us. Wind rustled through the trees. Birds scattered. My father swallowed a small tremor in his throat. Your mother is devastated. She says she doesn't recognize you. She never tried to. I didn't mean for the words to come out sharp, but they did. He exhaled slowly. Haley says, you want us to suffer. I don't, I said softly. But I won't suffer to prevent you from facing the consequences of your own choices. He looked away, jaw clenching. We needed your help. And I needed yours, I whispered, and none of you showed up. His shoulders sagged just slightly. The house is gone now. I know. Are you happy? No, I said, but I'm free. He blinked hard once, twice, as if trying to swallow a reaction he didn't expect. Then came the question that broke something open inside me. Why couldn't you just stay? Because that sentence, spoken through confusion, not cruelty, was the clearest window into his worldview I had ever been offered. He didn't understand my pain. He didn't understand my exhaustion. He didn't understand the years of financial dependence they had built on me. He didn't understand the emotional abandonment they cloaked as family dynamics. He only understood the version of me that benefited them, the version that stayed. I couldn't stay, I said, because staying meant disappearing. His face tightened, not with anger this time, but with something like grief. I thought we raised you better, he whispered. That line meant to shame me, lost all power. I'm raising myself now. For a moment, he looked like he might say something more, but pride swallowed it whole. He turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go. Each step, heavy shoulders stooped, dignity scattered across the driveway. I didn't follow. I didn't call out. I didn't crumble. When I stepped back inside, Mara wrapped her arms around me without asking. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. I didn't cry right away. Not until Mara whispered, you did it, Lauren. You finally stood up for yourself. Then the tears came, quiet, shaking, purifying. Not grief, rebirth. Later that afternoon, the official listing for my childhood home appeared online. A simple, sterile description. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, needs minor repairs, priced for quick sale. No mention of the life lived inside. No mention of the implosion. No mention of the daughter who held it up far longer than she ever should have. Mason texted me, Mom is broken. Dad won't talk to anyone. Haley moved out. It's all over. I'm sorry. I typed back. I know, be safe. That night, lying in the quiet of the guest room, something dawned on me, a truth I had been circling but hadn't quite stepped into. My family didn't lose the house because I left. They lost the house because they expected me to stay, and now that the house had fallen, something else was rising inside me. Strength, clarity, direction, self-respect. All the things they once took without asking. All the things I was reclaiming. Tomorrow would begin the final chapter. Not of collapse, of rebirth. On the 10th day, the world felt different. Not lighter, not easier, just honest. The kind of honesty that arrives only after everything collapses, not to punish you, but to free you. For the first time in my life, I woke up without the instinct to check my phone for emergencies, demands, crises disguised as questions. There were no missed calls from my parents, no frantic messages from Haley, no guilt-buried pleas. Nothing. Silence filled the space where obligation once lived, and I breathed, truly breathed. Mara made blueberry pancakes. Daniel read the news aloud from the kitchen counter. The morning sunlight painted everything warm. For a moment, I felt like I'd stepped into a life I didn't know how to want before, but now couldn't imagine living without. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed. One message. From Mason. The house is officially sold. Mom and Dad are moving into a small apartment near the interstate. Haley left town with a friend. They won't say it, but they're afraid to run into you. Not because of anger, because they're ashamed. I hope you're okay." I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I'd already cried all the tears that deserved to fall. Instead, I felt a surprising thing: compassion. Not responsibility, not guilt, not the old pull to fix everything. Just compassion for people who had built their entire identity on stability, only to realize the foundation had never been solid. Compassion for parents who mistook sacrifice for duty. Compassion for a sister who had believed dependence was a birthright. Compassion for a family that loved me in the only broken ways they knew how. But compassion does not require return. It does not require reunion. It does not require surrender. It simply exists. I went for a walk after breakfast. The trees were shedding the last of their autumn leaves, the air crisp with that transition between seasons. I took the long path around the neighborhood, letting the rhythm of my steps settle my heart. Halfway through, a familiar car slowed beside me, not my family's, Paula's. She rolled down the window with her usual theatrical flair. "Lauren, honey, you look different." "Good different?" I asked. She smiled, free different. That word wrapped around me like sunlight. She leaned out slightly. "People in town have stopped talking about the drama. They're talking about you, your strength." I blinked. "My strength?" "Yes," she said matter-of-factly. "Not everyone would have had the courage to walk away. Not everyone survives being scapegoated, but you did." Her words felt like a small gift, unexpected, warm, and deeply needed. After she drove off, I continued walking until I reached a small overlook that faced the hills. I sat on the wooden bench and let the quiet settle into my bones. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question I'd been avoiding. What do I want now? Not what do they need? Not how can I help? Not what will keep the peace? But what do I want? The answer surprised me in its simplicity: my own life. The life I postponed, the dreams I shelved, the ambitions I swallowed, the self I abandoned, so my family didn't have to face their reflection. I returned to Mara's house with a clarity that felt like new skin. She must have sensed it the moment I stepped inside. "You look ready," she said. "I am." "For what?" "For my future." That afternoon, I called Elise to finish the legal closure. She assured me everything was in place: the cease and desist, the protections, the documentation. I asked if there was anything else I needed to do. She said, "Yes. Live well. Nothing punishes dysfunction more than a woman who thrives after choosing herself." The words reverberated through me. Live well, choose myself, thrive. So I did. Within a week, I moved into a small apartment in a quiet suburb. Nothing extravagant, just clean, simple mine. I furnished it slowly, intentionally. A lamp Mara gave me. A bookshelf Daniel helped me assemble. A second-hand couch that felt like heaven after the chaos of the past weeks. I returned to consulting work with renewed purpose. For the first time in years, my money went toward my life, not into a black hole of family crisis. I saved. I planned, I dreamed. Mason visited occasionally. We talked. We healed. Not perfectly, but honestly. My parents eventually reached out, not with demands, but apologies shaped awkwardly around their pride. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for help. They simply said they were sorry. I forgave them, not for their sake, for mine. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It isn't erasing. It isn't reopening doors that took years to close. Forgiveness is choosing not to let the old pain dictate the new life. Haley never apologized. Not directly. But months later, she sent a short message. "I didn't understand before. I think I do now. I hope you're okay." And that was enough, not for restoration, but for release. Seasons passed. And one evening, as I sat in my apartment sipping tea and listening to soft jazz on the radio, a realization washed over me. I had rebuilt my life, not from obligation, not from pressure, not from fear, from choice, from strength, from self-love I had never been taught but had finally learned. I looked at the camera on my laptop, the one I used to record occasional reflections for a small online community that had grown unexpectedly supportive, and I pressed record. "Thank you," I said softly, "for listening to my story. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what part of this journey stayed with you the most? Your stories matter just as much as mine, and I truly appreciate hearing where in the world these stories reach." I smiled, a real smile, a free smile, because this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of the woman I was always meant to become. Not their provider, not their scapegoat, not their savior, just myself, strong, steady, whole, and finally home.